Hey guys, we're back for part 2, and let's get rolling with this.
Never Suna claimed I was stalking her. She had 4 restraining orders filed against me when I never even had anything to do with
She's
her.
insane.
Finally, the judge was sick of it. I guess he had finally seen just how crazy she was, because he didn't issue any more restraining orders after that. Me and Rachel almost didn't make it through this. Sarah made my life hell, but I'm really glad I ended things with her. So Sarah, wherever you are, I really hope you find the help you need. And I pray and hope no other man ever has to go through this.
That was story 4, now it's time for story 5.
For the past few weeks, me and my friends have been using the app Randonautica. One night recently, me and Daniel went to the movies. When the movie ended, it wasn't that late, so we came up with the idea to grab some food and use the app. We searched for creepy locations, and the app gave us a destination to drive to. The app was taking us to a quiet part of the highway. We had to pull over by an abandoned rest stop and walk the rest of the way because there were no roads heading into where the app was telling us to go. Me and Daniel walked towards the woods. We climbed over an old rusty fence. We carried on walking into the woods with about 5 minutes left until we reached our destination. We came prepared and brought with us flashlights, as we've been doing this often. We finally arrived to the location where the app was leading us to, and it led us to a cabin.
Okay, already getting shady vibes here.
It was hard to tell if someone was using this or it was left abandoned. Daniel asked if we should go inside and look around. I said, I don't know. It could be someone's property. Daniel eventually convinced me to check it out. There weren't any cars around or lights in the cabin. And we were kind of in the middle of nowhere, so I agreed. We entered the cabin by going through the front door, as it was unlocked. Just like the outside, the cabin looked abandoned, but also like someone had been living there. The downstairs was relatively normal. We went upstairs and there was only one room. We assumed it to be a bedroom, and after opening the door,
Don't open the bag.
The room was
That red bag looks very suspicious. You know what, if I saw all the mess and stuff inside, I'd only look on the bottom level, then head out, because at least that would give me enough evidence to show that someone lived here, someone died, there was a giant mess, etc.
Someone had nailed pages from what I assumed was a Bible all over the walls and ceiling. Scattered on the floor were more Bibles and Bible pages that had been ripped out. If this wasn't creepy enough, there was a bag sitting on the bed. I looked inside and there was a small Bible, a box of matches, a large rusty pair of scissors, and a hammer that had blood on it.
Best indication for now.
What was in the bag. And he said we should probably leave.
Yeah.
As we went downstairs, Daniel stopped me and told me to be quiet. After listening out carefully, we heard men talking in the near distance. Then I noticed, through the window, about 6 or 7 flashlights in the woods approaching the cabin.
Oh no.
We quietly left through the front door again and started jogging back to where the car was. We hopped the fence and drove back home. That night, Daniel texted me with a picture of a news article that he had read that was posted 2 days ago.
Oh no.
A man brutally murdered in his home. He was found with Bible pages stuffed in his hand. I keep thinking that those men by the cabin we found were responsible for that man's murder.
Right, we're on story 5, so we got 7 stories left, or 6 after this one.
We have been caught in their cabin. Me and Daniel might have suffered the same similar fate.
Okay, story 6.
United States. During the 90s, my family lived in a tight-knit community.
Okay.
We would often have get-togethers and barbecues with our neighbors. It was truly the American dream. My brother and I were very good friends with all the kids from our neighborhood.
Okay.
And whenever we'd have one of these gatherings, all the kids would get together for a game of manhunt to avoid any of the back and forth of who would be chosen as the hider and the seekers. My brothers and I would usually volunteer to be the seekers. There was this giant forest area outside of our neighborhood where the games would take place. And since we would often go fishing with my dad around this area, we knew it pretty well. You could say we were all very competitive. I remember it was the 4th of July, 1996. The entire community threw a party at the neighborhood park. And of course, this meant that we kids were going to have our traditional game of manhunt, one of the biggest we've ever had, and it would take place after the fireworks show. By the time the fireworks stopped, I'd say it was around 9:30 p.m. Shortly after, we gathered everyone for a game and began around 9:45. Things started out like any other game. We caught most of the low-level hiders within the first 10 minutes. However, there were still some of the older kids hiding out in some of the more obscure areas of the park.
Okay, what happens?
We were always told never to go too deep into the woods. To give you some perspective, the park we were at was at the very back of our neighborhood. Beyond that was the forest that went on for about 3 miles before you got to the highway that led into town. There was no hunting allowed in this forest because of its proximity to residential areas. So we would often see a lot of deer and other animals roaming about.
Makes sense.
Anyways, the game went on for a while longer, and despite their best efforts, we apprehended most of the hiders, except for a girl who was about 8 years old.
Oh
We'll
no.
call her Ashley. I found this to be very odd because Ashley
Don't tell me
was the best hider.
something happened to her.
We made our way to the small lake besides the clubhouse. This was the last area we would check before letting someone know that we couldn't find Ashley. It was about this time that I began to feel this sinking feeling in my stomach. I was only 11 years old at the time, but I could tell there was something wrong. I distinctly remember seeing the moon reflecting brightly upon the surface of the water as we made our way around the lake. When we got to the far side of the lake, we started hearing a strange noise coming from within the trees. It sounded like someone was being brutally stabbed over and over again, but no screams were accompanying the awful sound. The 3 of us approached the tree line.
Oh.
When my brother
that's not
pointed his
good, right?
flashlight into the
I'm
trees,
back.
we saw a hooded figure with its back turned to us. They appeared to be kneeling down and stabbing at something with a large hunting knife. As soon as the beam of light fell upon the figure, it immediately stopped what it was doing and stood up. The next thing I remember is my oldest brother covering my eyes with his free hand and telling us to run back to the park. The 3 of us took off and ran towards the party.
Probably best
hearing
idea.
the sounds of thudding boots tearing through the bush behind us. And as soon as we got back to the party, my older brother told my dad about the man in the woods. The rest of the night is a blur to me. I can only remember seeing the police showing up and me falling asleep in my dad's arms. The next morning, I was told that Ashley ended up leaving with her parents.
Thank God she's safe.
Which explains why we couldn't find her. I didn't get a good look at what the hooded man had been stabbing at, but my brother told me it was a deer carcass. Looking back, I suppose we could just chalk it up to someone hunting in a restricted area. But there's still something that bothers me. What kind of person rapidly stabs at a dead deer in the dark?
Right.
And even though he was nowhere to be seen by the time we got back to the party, I'm certain that he was chasing us, at least for a short distance. It makes me wonder what he would have done if he caught us.
Oh, that's why people don't imagine this.
Our neighborhood ever played.
Mate, this was story 6 or something, right? Story 5 or 6.
It happened when I was in middle school. One day my family decided to visit my mother's parents' house after a long time. The house was located in a rural area.
Yeah, I'm just gonna not count these.
A convenience store and a gas station around my grandparents' house. And down there in the middle is a small trail that takes a long walk to get there. It was located in the most isolated part of the village. So whenever I walked along the trail, all I could see was a bamboo forest or a large area of rice paddies.
So far, so good, I guess.
And the street lights are all worn out, so only a few of them are operating properly. As soon as we arrived, I greeted my grandparents and had a really nice and delicious meal with them.
Everything seems okay.
It was pretty good then. The next evening, all the relatives gathered at my grandparents' house. My parents and others said that they were going to see the nightscape of the night sea with my grandparents. But at that time, my cousin and I weren't interested in that much, so we decided to stay at home. We were chatting for a while, and it suddenly started to rain. Then my mom called me to check the door and go to bed early, saying that they were going to stay the night in one of the relatives' houses because it was too late to go back. So we were sitting back and chatting and watching TV. Some kinds of that after checking if we locked the door well. After a while, my cousin...
Okay, interesting. What's with this? That's just a bit on the creepy side, if you ask me.
Kept pestering me, saying that he's hungry. I said, "Hey, would you like to go to buy some snacks together?"
Oh, no.
No,
No.
No, I'm scared to go out right now. Well, my cousin was such a coward boy.
I think he had the right mind.
And in my case, I wasn't scared at all. I could walk at night or watch horror movies by myself. Eventually, I ended up coming out alone to get some snacks for him. Light drizzle was falling at that time.
You should just stay inside at this point.
So I left the porch without an umbrella and stared at the trail. And at that very moment, I felt really weird. I got goosebumps at first. However, I soon ignored it and went straight to the convenience store to buy some snacks.
You shouldn't have gone anywhere.
Everything was fine until then. As soon as I left the convenience store, the rain poured heavily. Holy crap, I should have brought an umbrella.
Yeah, you should.
Mumbling like that,
Dingus.
I started to rush to the house. At that instant, the lightning suddenly flashed. Slowly frightened, I started running faster. When I reached the middle of the trail, I saw the muddy road and the broken streetlights. And something was dropping over the muddy road. I couldn't see it clearly because it was too dark around, but something like a pebble kept falling under the streetlights. And when I looked up at the streetlight, my heart literally sank.
Oh God, what is it?
I saw a silhouette of a person hanging upside down on a streetlight and holding on its column. It was a woman, and she was hanging like a monkey. You know what I mean. I was so surprised that I couldn't try to run away, just stared blankly at her. At that moment, there was another flash of lightning, and every time it flashed, the woman's face was clearly seen. Her crying face, smiling face, and a face with no expression. Looking at that face, my body was cold and stiff. I couldn't move my legs at all. The lightning stopped soon, and I couldn't see the woman anymore because the surrounding of the trail was dark again.
Run.
I then started screaming and rushing toward home. It was then... She was laughing out loud.
God.
Shoot, if I turn around, she'll kill me, for sure. I ran like a crazy person. And when I got to the house, I screamed, hitting the front door with my body. My cousin came out, opened the door, and asked me if I saw a ghost or something. But I couldn't tell him what I saw because I was afraid he might be scared. I was thinking if I should call my parents to come over quickly. But somehow, I didn't think they would believe me.
Yeah.
So I just thought I might have seen something wrong, and eventually decided to sleep like that. But I couldn't sleep well that night. I kept feeling weird. There was a bamboo forest right next to the window.
Who wouldn't feel weird after seeing that?
In the room, and the sound of bamboo leaves hitting the window was so creepy. Feeling uncomfortable, I turned to the window. And there was someone else. Someone was standing by the window looking inside our room. I couldn't scream again. Covering myself with blanket, I was shivering and thinking I shouldn't move. But then I heard a strange sound of a song. I didn't know exactly what song he was singing, but his trembling voice gave me goosebumps enough. It had been singing like that for a while, and then it started knocking on the window. Open the door. It was neither a woman nor a man.
Wait, what?
Knock, knock. Open the door. Knock, knock. Open the door. It kept talking like that in a deep, low voice. But suddenly, open the door! It was howling in an extremely high voice, and soon the voice was turning into
Christ,
laughter.
it looks like
I
sounds are right.
recognized that the laugh was exactly the same voice I heard when I'd run off the trail a few hours ago. I had no choice but waited for the sound to disappear, and I guess I fell asleep so faintly. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of the phone ringing. At first, I was even afraid about the sound of a ringtone, so I didn't come out from my blanket until Mom and the other adults came back. After a few hours, my cousin suddenly approached me and said like this, "Hey, did you hear anything strange last night?" To my surprise, my cousin also heard that weird song, knocking sound, and the laughter yesterday. So, it was not a dream. At first, we were planning to stay one more day, but I begged my parents to go back home and I could come home right away that day. What the heck was that thing I saw on the trail that day? Do you think it followed me?
I mean,
Well,
obviously.
it's still a mystery that hasn't been solved to this day.
Boy, this is getting deeper and deeper.
This is Lucy Chum.
Good horror stories nonetheless, but it's going deeper and deeper into the craziness hole. About my friend's house. Okay.
This happened when I was in college. One day, I decided to sleep at my friend's house. After having fun eating takeout with my friend and chatting for a while, we both laid down to sleep. Then I suddenly started hearing the sound of a wooden percussion that is typically used in Korean temples.
Hey, what?
However, as my friend and I were sincere Buddhists, I just laughed and then fell asleep, thinking it was a hallucination. About a month later, I met her again at a cafe near her house, and I made a joke. "Hey, did you turn on the Buddhist broadcast at your house that day? I kept hearing the sound of a wooden instrument when I slept over at your house." Then my friend suddenly looked serious and asked me if I heard it, and she abruptly called her mother, trembling. "Hey, Mom, my friend heard it too. What should I do now?" In confusion, I asked what was going on, and my friend suddenly cried and said, "I keep experiencing sleep paralysis ever since I started living in that house. I've been suffering this for 5 months, not 1 or 2 days. I can't live like this anymore." She then confessed that she'd been staying at a nearby motel. It was fine at first, but she started to have sleep paralysis more and more, even when she was in the motel. I was so surprised when she told me this. To reassure her, I told her to pack up right away, check out of the motel, and come to my house. Then she cried even harder this time, and she said she's too scared to enter that house by herself. She asked me to go with her, so we took a taxi and went back to her house. However, the moment I went into her house, I thought I was going to cry too, and I was sure that something was wrong. As soon as I opened the door, I suddenly smelled rotten water. My friend had a goldfish at the time, and there wasn't even a drop of water left in the fish tank. The fish was dried up and laid there dead. We ran out of the house without even thinking about packing her stuff up. We didn't go back to my house right away. Instead, we wandered around the crowded streets for a long time before returning. When we finally returned to my house, we both sat on my bed, thinking for a long time about what we had to do, and then fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, I noticed that there were several missed calls from my mom. When I called her back, she asked me, "Are you at home with someone right now?" "Why, Mom?" I asked her, almost crying out of fear. And then she told me about her dream. In her dream, a tall, skinny, and abnormally big-eyed man was looking through my window in black clothes. "Why isn't she coming out? Why? 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 Why?" He muttered this while watching me.
Dear God.
Mom ran towards him, shouting, "What are you doing?" Then she suddenly woke up from her dream. So I was honest and confessed to my mom about my friend's house, and she told me not to go anywhere with her. She lived in my house for about a month. One of her mother's relatives was a shaman, and she suddenly got mad when she talked about her daughter, and then advised my friend to stay close to me. I think her house might have been possessed by a ghost. I thought about why he couldn't come inside my house. I guess it's because my mom bought some ceremonial salt before I moved into this house.
That's a possibility.
And one of my relatives, who was a monk, once visited my house to pray for me while I was away. Maybe that's why. My friend later told me that she had moved out of the house, and the owner actually accepted her request without any complaints. I think cheap houses like those always have a legitimate reason.
Yeah.
And fortunately, she's doing very well now.
Okay, here's another one. Daddy, I grew teeth. Oh boy, the titles just keep getting weirder and weirder.
My father's grandmother once told him a story of a man from the 1900s in Mexico that had a very heart-stopping experience. Said man, let's call him Jose, a very common Mexican name, loved to drink. So he and one of his friends are finishing drinking at a local bar one night. When they leave the bar, they say their goodbyes and go their separate ways for the evening. As I stated before, it's Mexico in the 1900s. For most people, you either travel by your own 2 feet or by horse. Luckily for Jose, he had a horse. So off he went, back to his home late at night, taking the dirt trails. Along the way, he passes under a bridge. As he comes out the other side, he begins to hear what sounds like a child crying.
Okay.
He stops and gets off his horse. He looks in the direction of the crying. He soon finds the source of the crying. It's a little boy crying all alone.
Wait, what?
He asks the child if he's all right. I'm lost. Can you help me? Jose, of course, agrees to help the little boy, so he picks him up and places him on the rear of the saddle. He gets back on, and then they're on their way. As they travel along, Jose feels the little kid poke his back a few times. So Jose asks what's the matter. The young boy responds, Daddy, look, I grew teeth.
Oh God.
Jose looks back. He's face to face with a horrifying sight. What was once a little boy now set a dark figure with rows of sharp, long white teeth, smiling at him, with a pair of eyes that radiated death itself. Turning white with fear, Jose's only reaction was to pull back the reins of the horse, which causes the horse to fall backwards. Luckily, he didn't get caught in the middle and just fell off the back. Jose wasted no time getting up and looking for his horse, but unfortunately the horse had been spooked and ran off into the night. Jose proceeded to do the same and hightail it out of there, not even daring to test his luck. He didn't look back. The following day, when his friend asked to go for some drinks, he said only a little, because he didn't want to stay too late.
That makes sense, I guess. A story to scare my son.
Son, we need to talk about internet safety.
Internet safety. Everyone knows what internet safety is. The only thing is parents need to do is somehow put parental blocks on stuff on websites.
He crumpled down onto the floor next to him. His laptop was open and he was playing Minecraft. Comments scrolled down the side of the screen in a chat box, and I could see his eyes were locked into the app.
Classic Minecraft.
Son, can you stop your game for a minute? He then closed the laptop and looked up at me. Dad, is this going to be another cheesy, scary story? What? I faked hurt feelings for a second. Then I grinned at him. I thought you liked my tales. He grew up listening to my stories about children who encountered witches, ghosts, werewolves, and trolls. Unlike many generations of parents, I use scary stories to reinforce morals and teach lessons about safety.
Yeah, I guess that
Single
makes
dads like
sense.
me should use all the parenting tools at their disposal. They were fine when I was 6, but now that I'm getting older, they don't scare me anymore. If you're going to tell a story about the internet, can you make it really, really scary? I squinted at him incredulously, and he folded his arms and said, Dad, I'm 10 and I can handle it.
No, we can't.
Okay, I'll try. I began. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Colby. He sighed deeply. It was sure that his expression indicated that he wasn't impressed by the introduction. I continued. Colby went online and joined several children's websites. After a while, he started talking to other kids in-game and on the message boards. He made friends with another 10-year-old boy named Helper23. They liked the same video games and shows, they laughed at each other's jokes, and they explored new games together. After several months of friendship, Colby gave Helper23 6 diamonds in a game they were playing. This was a very generous gift. Colby's birthday was coming up, and Helper23 wanted to send him a cool present in real life. Colby figured it wouldn't hurt to give Helper23 his home address, as long as he promised not to tell it to any strangers or grown-ups. Helper23 swore he wouldn't tell anyone else, not even his own parents, and set about mailing the package. I paused the story and asked my son, "Do you think that was a good idea?" "No," he said, shaking his head vigorously. In spite of himself, he was getting into the story. Well, neither did Colby. Colby felt guilty about giving away his home address, and his guilt began to grow. By the time he put on his pajamas the next night, his guilt and fear were larger than anything else in his life. He resolved to admit the truth to his parents. The punishment would be steep, but it was worth it to have a clear conscience. He squirmed in his bed as he waited for his parents to tuck him in. My son knew the scary part was coming up. He leaned forward, wide-eyed, and I spoke quietly and deliberately. He heard all the noises of the house. The washing machine bounced around in the laundry room. Branches scraped against the brick outside his room.
But it's not there.
His baby brother cooed in the nursery. And there were some other noises he couldn't quite pinpoint. Finally, his dad's footsteps echoed down the hall. "Hey, Dad," he called out nervously. "I have something to tell you." His dad stuck his head in the doorway at a weird angle. In the darkness, his mouth didn't seem to move. The eyes were all wrong. "Yes, son?" The voice was way off, too. Are you okay, Dad?" he asked. "Uh-huh," sung the father in his strangely affected voice. Colby
It's a corpse.
Defensively.
Oh my god, someone broke in and is using his dad's body to try and get him.
Is Mom around? Here I am. Mom's head popped into the doorway below Dad's.
Definitely.
And her voice was an unnatural falsetto. "Were you about to tell us that you gave our home address to Helper23? You shouldn't have done that. We told you to never give out personal information on the internet." She continued. "He wasn't really a kid. He just pretended to be one. Do you know what he did? He came to our house, broke in, and murdered both of us, just so he could spend some time with you." A fat man in a wet jacket emerged in the doorway holding the 2 severed heads. Colby shrieked and gasped as the man dropped the heads on the ground, unsheathed his knife, and moved into the room to work on the boy. My son screamed too. He twisted his hands defensively over his face.
Well, that's
we were
really
just
getting
getting
the
started
story.
with the story. After several hours, the boy was almost dead, and his screams had become whimpers. The killer noticed the wailing of a baby in another room.
Oh no.
He removed his knife from Colby. He had never murdered a baby before, and was excited about the prospect. Helper23 left Colby to die, and followed the cries through the house. In the nursery, he walked to the crib, picked the baby up, and held it in his arms. He moved towards the changing table to get a better look, but as he held the baby, the crying died down. On the contrary, he looked up and smiled. Helper23 had never held a baby, but he gently bounced it in his arms like a pro. He wiped his bloody hands on the blanket so he could stroke the baby's cheek. "Hey there, sweet little guy." His beautiful rage of sadism melted into something warmer.
Oh, God, don't tell me that this murderer or whatever, or the baby's him.
Doctor. He walked out of the nursery, took the baby home, named him William, and raised him as his very own. After I finished the story, my son was visibly shaken. But Dad, my name's William.
Oh, no.
I gave him a classic dad wink and tousled his hair. Of course it is, son. William ran up the stairs to his bedroom in a fury of sobs. I think he liked my story.
Oh, God, I was right. The murderer's the guy who adopted him.
With Kajabi, it's easy to...
I think we've got one more story left, folks. It's been a long one, but sure, it's been worth it. God, I miss these. I got almost killed in the front of my house. I think that's what I say.
2 years ago, when I was 19 back then, we
That's
moved to a new house.
2 years
It was
ago.
newly built, and although it's not that
No stroke of
nice,
time at
but
this point.
we were satisfied that we have our own house.
Okay.
One day it was on a rainy night, and I was walking alone in the dark street. Because it was almost midnight, there were no vehicles at all at the time. I was returning home from my friend's house nearby, where it was her birthday on that day.
Oh, congrats.
While I was walking, I felt like someone was behind following me. However, when I looked back, there was just an empty street.
I've been there before.
But I was feeling relieved because I was already in front of our main door. Then the incident suddenly happened. As I tried to grab a key in my purse, a stranger held on my wrist. It was a guy, and he definitely didn't look normal at all. He had a big grin on his face.
I mean, this has not happened to me, but you get the gist.
Big and red eyes are bulging out. When I looked around, there was no one else on the street. Considering it was in the middle of the night, it was no wonder. I got panicked. I grabbed my wrist and tried to kick him, screaming out. Then he laughed and let go of me, and I banged on the door and shouted as loud as I could, "Help! Help me! Open the door!" My dad quickly opened the door. Still crying, I shouted and explained what just had happened, but when I looked back, there was no one there. I couldn't sleep at all that night.
Yeah.
The morning after that night, I
Wait, we got like 4
was
minutes,
trying
okay.
to calm down myself just watching TV. There was the news about a murder case. The victim was a girl, same as my age, and the police just found her body in front of her house's main door. Also, her wrist was cut by some sharp thing. The blood was all over her face, and there was a note behind it. She didn't try to fight back, so I killed her. It was written like this with a smiling face. My heart dropped.
So, because she fought back, he didn't kill her?
That is for sure. It must be the same guy who I met yesterday. What if I didn't resist? What if I didn't shout or scream for help? And what if no one opened the door? It is said to be the man is still wanted. To tell the truth, I just don't want to meet that guy in my neighborhood. Never, ever again.
Something happened when I was playing Among Us. Okay, last one. I believe it's the last one. There's no more room for us for one after this.
My name is Paul. I play a lot of video games with my group of friends.
Okay.
Recently, we've been playing Among Us most nights. Every time my friends and I played video games together, we always used our mics, and a lot of times, we just trolled other players. We were playing Among Us and had a lot of discussions about who the killers could be. Me and my two friends, whose names were Harry and Wayne, thought it was the guy named Sean, and so did the rest of the lobby. We eventually voted him to be ejected. During the discussion, Sean was getting more and more aggressive, insisting it wasn't him who was the killer. And me and my two friends actually found it quite funny.
I guess
After
anyone
the
would.
game, Harry had received a message from a guy named Sean saying he wasn't the killer, and we shouldn't have ejected him, and so on. Wayne thought it would be funny to invite Sean into our lobby to troll him the whole game, and tell the rest of the players in the discussion that we think Sean's the killer. So that's what we did. We played the 2 games with the Sean guy, each time trolling him and saying that he was the killer and getting him ejected. Sean eventually left our lobby, and we didn't play with him again that night. I'm a light sleeper and wake up to the slightest of sounds. I woke up around 2 a.m. by the sound of a car. I looked out my window and I saw a car parked just outside my house. The car was still running, but no one got out, no one got in the car. I looked around and saw my street to be empty. Just before trying to go back to sleep, my computer started up. I went over to my computer and there was a blue screen. In the middle of the blue screen was an icon that said, "Open for discussion."
Wait, what?
I clicked on it and it revealed a very gory photo of a man who was cut in half, and underneath was written, "You have been ejected." I tried to move the mouse and turn off my computer, but it didn't work. The only thing to do was to look at the gruesome photo. My computer did turn off eventually, and as soon as it did, that car that was outside my house slowly drove off. The next day I woke up and saw a text from my friends Harry and Wayne, and they both said they had similar experiences, that they received weird pictures on the computer and phones, pictures of people cut in half. I asked them both if they think it was something to do with that guy we were trolling. They both didn't know what to think. I thought that Sean guy somehow found out where we lived and hacked our devices. What scares me is how real the photos were, and how he knew where me and my friends lived and was able to hack our devices so easily.
Well, guys, that was quite an interesting one, and I hope you guys enjoyed this.